So, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We're happy you're here.
Kind enough to offer a spot to talk to you about self-leadership tonight. My name is Tim Berube, and funny enough, letters on the back there just mean I have a master's in business and a master's of science, and my specialty in science is actually leadership. So you're probably talking to the right guy in town about leadership. I'm probably the expert in town right now on the subject. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about basically leadership, what it's all about. In general, we have a definition of leadership, and that is the scholars. It's if you go to the university and you ask one of the people in the business department what's leadership, you're going to say it's the art of influencing others. Very generally, that's what it is. In truth, that is all we really study at the university level, is the art of influencing others in terms of leadership studies. But of course, it's bigger than that, because if you can't lead yourself, the odds of you leading somebody else are pretty low, I would think, right? So if you can't sort yourself out, then it's pretty tough to motivate other people to do stuff for you. And so tonight we're going to talk about how do we sort ourselves out, okay? So what is self-leadership? Well, this is my definition, because there isn't a definition. I've had to create this one. And it's possessing the personal integrity to face the necessity of discipline, deprivation, frustration, and pain to be loyal to yourself. Complicated, it hurts, right? One of the biggest words we can use in this is integrity. What does that really mean? It means to be true and authentic to yourself, right? That is to say that we're not actually being deceptive with ourselves. It's very easy to lie to yourself, because nobody's going to call you on it, right? So integrity is to strip that away and say, no, I'm going to try and, to the best of my ability, to be honest with myself and to be a good character. So that's what really integrity is all about. This idea of discipline means to look at something and say, okay, I'm going to stick with this, right? To put up with deprivation. In a lot of cases, the easy answer, is not the best solution for us in the long term. So sometimes you have to deprive yourself in order to basically do the right thing for yourself. Does that kind of make sense to you? Especially true when I want to sit on the couch and eat Pringles, and I know that's not going to be good for me. So I have to deprive myself of that. Frustration, that comes from dealing with the day-to-day worries of life. And actually pain. Sometimes it's painful to actually to do things for yourself that are of high integrity. And in the end, what we're really trying to do is be loyal to ourselves. Because if we're not loyal to ourselves, that's bad news, right? So what it really is about is this process of becoming. And don't get caught up on what that really is right now. We'll kind of get into it as we go, all right? I'm also going to use a little bit of colorful language tonight, because believe it or not, emotional language is colorful. Go on in. So tonight we're going to talk about something called vitality very quickly. I don't know if any of you have heard of vitality. This is also, if you have a comment or you have a question as we go, please feel free to speak up, because this is a kind of an interactive session. I kind of like doing it that way, because you learn more and I understand what your concerns are at the same time. Okay. So vitality, we're going to speak about that quickly. What is vitality? What is it to be have a life that's full of energy and happiness and spirit and all this stuff, right? What is a desired focus for becoming? We mentioned becoming before, so we're going to get into this idea of becoming. And becoming is really something that's based in spirituality. And we'll talk about what spirituality is. A lot of people are unfamiliar with spirituality, so we're going to talk about what that is and what that really means to us, especially because we have a mature crowd here. Really good, because you guys are getting to the point where you're trying to build wisdom, and spirituality really comes in when you start trying to build wisdom, okay? We're going to talk about emotional bullshit. Yeah, I told you some of the language is going to be helpful. Good evening.
You just started.
We're going to talk about the mind. We're going to talk about the emotions. We're going to talk about spirituality. We're going to talk about how to move forward. And then we're going to talk about how do you change yourself in order to move forward. Because change is one of these things that most people find extremely difficult. We were just talking about comfort zones here earlier tonight and how really comfortable they are, how difficult it is to get out of them, right? And then we're just going to wrap it up, okay? So vitality, if you take the dictionary definition, which is exactly what the top line is a state of being strong and active and having a lot of energy. That's simply what vitality is. Now, all of us want that. I don't think there's anybody in the room that will say, no, I don't want that. We all want this. Especially as we age, we want to stay strong and active, right? And have lots of energy. Because it's hard to enjoy life if we're not having that in our lives. So what's required for that? Well, vitality basically is broken down into really 4 different things. Sleep, diet, exercise, and mental, emotional, spiritual health, which is the last one. We're going to spend some time on this one. But sleep, you want 8 hours a day for men. Ideally, this is average, okay? Not everybody needs 8 hours, but on average, about 8 hours. And women need slightly more than men, based on the current research, about 8.5, believe it or not. Simply because there's more going on in women than there is in men. So they need more sleep to recover. Okay. Diet. I know you bring a lot of nutritionists and chiropractors in, and they'll talk to you about diet and how important that is and these kind of things. So this is a one-liner. Diet. You want a predominantly whole food, plants-based diet. And that's based on the work of Colin Campbell, PhD, on something called the China study. Has anybody here heard of the China study? Okay, perfect. So the 2 of you actually know what that is. So this
Just quickly, what is the Chinese study?
Chinese study is the biggest study of connection between what you eat and your health. And this was done in China by a group of researchers, Colin Campbell being one of the lead researchers in the United States. And what he found was that the more you introduce whole food, plant-based to your diet, that is, move away from meats, the healthier you become.
And the longer you live.
And the longer you live, right? So and there's a direct connection to meats and fishes and disease. And matter of fact, we're starting to find now that meat is actually not the best thing for you. I'm not anti-meat, but what I am saying is you want to limit it. You want to cut it down. We eat way too much meat in North America, and it leads to a lot of other problems too. But anyway, if you're curious, you can read the China study, and actually I'll get you into it. He's actually, does anybody you all have Netflix at home? Yes, no? You can look up a show called Forks Over Knives. Actually, Colin Campbell's in that, and he'll actually walk you through the China study and what the results are. Pretty
The
nice.
book is itself in PDF, online.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah. Really interesting, right? Especially because if you're worried about, cancer and these kind of things, pretty much this guy will prevent you from getting cancer. In a nutshell. I can't testify to that, but what I'm saying is the research is very compelling in this area, right? Okay. Supplementation. You should be taking at least a multivitamin a day. And I recommend a high-quality multivitamin. And most people are going, wow, I don't like pill popping and stuff like this. But I'll tell you what, JAMA, which is the Journal of American Medical Association in 2004, finally broke down. And because of the overwhelming body of research that said, if you don't take a multivitamin, you're going to be sick. And so it's to your best interest to do that. Yes?
Did you mean multivitamin, or do you mean a multivitamin mineral supplement?
Same thing. Yeah, multivitamin and mineral. Yeah. So you want to get. So I mean, if you're going to go to Walmart, like a lot of people buy their multivitamins at Walmart. I don't like Walmart vitamins, but if you're going to buy one at Walmart, the only one I'd recommend is Jamieson Megavim, and that's like a 3-star multivitamin. You're better off to go to Kelly's Nutrition in town and get a product called Progressive, and that's a 4-star capsulated multivitamin. And they're a little more expensive, but they're going to help you a lot more, right? Okay. So the reason for this is a number of reasons. First of all, an interesting study, and I'll point to this one, is that in 1950, if you ate an apple, right, and all the nutrition that was in that apple, all the vitamins and the mineral content that's in that apple, today you have to eat 6 apples to get the same vitamins and mineral concentrations. So nobody can eat enough fruits and veggies to get all your vitamins and minerals nowadays because the food is deficient. It may look okay, it may taste okay, but the stuff you need is not in it, right? So this is why JAM has come out and said, we need to do this.
Is that because of GMOs?
No, it's got nothing to do with GMO. It's got to do with the way we're doing farming. We're using very intensive farming basis, and we're not replenishing the soil. We're not moving from lot to lot like we used to. We use the same fields over and over again.
What about the chemtrails and that?
Chemtrails, I don't know too much about that. This is just about, you know, how do I actually improve my health today and to reduce disease, basically, right? So again, being loyal to yourself. So this is, I'm just introducing that again. Exercise, this is a toughie, okay? And this is put out by the CDC in the States, the Center for Disease Control, and they just changed the recommendations this year. And what they recommend is moderate to intense activity for at least 300 minutes a week. That's 5 hours of being at the target zone. So that's for advanced health benefits, right? If you want to be really healthy, that's what it looks like. And here's the other thing they don't tell you, is as we age, we actually have to be more active to be healthy, not less. That's kind of a eye popper, right? Because everybody thinks, oh, hey, I'm getting older, I can slow down. No, it's the opposite. You actually have to get more active to stay healthy as you age. So that's why I put this one up here. I know that usually we have a mature crowd in here. I'm pretty much at this a week, and I'll tell you, this is really tough to maintain. You have to be dedicated to do it, right? So, and then finally, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, which we're gonna focus on tonight, because you spend a lot of time talking about these other things to other folks, right? So it's not important that we cover it. So, any questions on that before we move on?
What about the sleep, Tim?
Yeah.
I've heard, now I can't remember who said it, but that seniors, I guess they're taking anyone over 60 or over 70 probably, really, I don't know if they said they need or they get only about 4.5 hours of sleep.
Yeah, some folks, what happens is as we age, basically our pineal gland gets a little bit older, and our pineal actually regulates melatonin and serotonin.
Yes.
Those are neurotransmitters in our brain, right? So serotonin give us that feeling of well-being, and melatonin helps us sleep, right? So if your melatonin levels start dropping with age, the best thing you can do is start taking a melatonin supplement. So take 3 milligrams a night, and basically that'll offset whatever is being reduced due to the pineal actually not working as well as it should when you're younger. And that'll actually help you sleep quite a bit more. Just take it about half an hour before bed,
Okay.
and it'll help. And it's cheap, you can get any place, right? Yeah.
So do you know what calcifies the pineal?
Yeah, sure, fluoride.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah,
What was it?
fluoride.
Fluoride.
Yeah.
Oh, our friend.
This is why we fight to keep fluoride out of the water.
Yeah, right.
Yes, of course.
Another thing.
A lot of my friends that have taken that supplement say, oh, that they get nightmares.
Some people do, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's, some people, you have to try it, right? And see if it reacts well with you or not. Like for me, some nights I take only about 1 milligram now because I'm younger. But after 50, what happens is your melatonin starts dropping off. And so you have a tougher and tougher time sleeping well. So if you take supplemental melatonin, it actually helps you do that, right? Okay. So the desired focus here for becoming, which is what's becoming? Well, becoming is moving from where you are to where you're not. And what is where we're not? Well, that's kind of scary. We'll talk about that a bit later on too. So what's required when we're gonna go someplace that we're not at right now? Well, we need mental control. These are the things that are required. We need emotional regulation. We need positive acts, and we need genuine behavior. So what's mental control? That's the ability to control your personal thoughts. And thoughts are really kind of interesting because they're like a light switch. You can turn them off and you can turn them on, but you have to choose to do that, right? So if you let your thoughts run wild, then you're not really in control of them, are you? Most of us have a lot of thoughts in a day, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on too.
So who's doing the choosing?
You are, because they're in your head. So only you can choose your thoughts.
So I'm not my thoughts, I have thoughts.
That you have thoughts, yes.
Thank you.
Okay? So you can choose your thoughts. So you can choose to think about somebody in a positive light, or you can choose to think of them as not so positive, right? It's up to you. It's really your choice. And nobody can tell you what to think. It's your only real freedom. The only real freedom you have is in your thoughts. Okay? Outside of that, somebody's trying to control you everywhere, but you control your own thoughts. Nobody can do that for you. Okay? That's really powerful knowledge. Okay? Emotional regulation, the ability to attenuate personal emotional intensity. Does everybody experience rage in this class? Everybody has, yeah. So the emotions are like this. I mean, they can be really, really intense. So like way up here and way down here and way up here. So what you want to do is get to a point where, okay, you're not go way up here off the rocker and way down here like depressed, right? You want to get to a point where you're going, okay, whoop, 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 whoop. So you're actually getting less intensity out of your emotions. Why? Because it allows you to have more control over how you're going to act. Because if you don't have control over your emotional intensity, you're just going to act. Somebody really pisses you off, you get enraged. That's not good, because now we go to jail, right? So, positive acts. We want to be able to choose what acts that manifest positive outcomes, because at the end of the day, life is long, and if you're nasty to people, eventually that comes back at you. You've all heard of karma, this idea of karma. So what we really want to do is we want to choose acts that are positive in nature to yourself and to others. And the reason for it is, well, to yourself it's obvious because you want to be loyal to yourself. To others, the reason for it is because they're going to make decisions about you that are going to impact your life. Yes?
So would you accept as a substitute for the word karma, what goes around comes around, and would you say that that is a law that operates 100% of the time, or sometimes?
Sometimes.
Not always?
Not always. Because I mean, if it worked 100% of the time, we would never have nasty people in charge, right?
Hadn't thought of that. Thank you. That's interesting.
Okay. So it works some of the times, so not always. So you can say, well, hopefully karma gets them, because I don't have time for it, but that's not always a guarantee, right? Okay. And genuine behavior. What do I mean by genuine behavior? Again, we get into this idea of true and authentic. You want to be true and authentic to yourself. And when you're true and authentic to yourself, you're going to be more true and authentic with others, right? And so this is the ability to consistently display true and authentic conduct. And that is to say that when we're dealing with others, we're not trying to actually hurt them, right? Even though sometimes it may come across like, we're meddling or doing things that they're making them very uncomfortable and they're upset with us, we're not actually trying to intentionally hurt them. So that's what true and authentic conduct looks like, okay? Does everybody kind of get this idea?
But then when they turn on you, it kind of takes you out of your comfort zone, right?
Guess what? The next slide is what happens when this stuff doesn't work. Emotional bullshit. Yeah, absolutely. So this guy, I love this guy. This is Dr. Carl Alasko. He's got 35 years of clinical practice as a psychologist. And so he wrote this book, and this is the title of the book, by the way, Emotional Bullshit. And I'll show you a picture of what that book looks like. And this is one of my favorite books. And the reason for it is this guy is no nonsense. He drills into how people behave, why they behave that way, what you can do about it, and what should you do if you're doing it yourself. And he's written a couple of books. This one's called Emotional Bullshit. We're going to talk a little bit about what he talks about in this book. And we're also going to just talk about another book he wrote, which was called Beyond Blame, which is very, really, really interesting if you want to start thinking about forgiveness, which is what do you do when somebody attacks you and what do you do about it? So he talks about the three horsemen of the rationalization apocalypse, or for short, the toxic trio. And this is basically the way a lot of people behave. And this is what happens when you don't get the slide before right in yourself, and other people don't get it right either. So you have something called denial. The three horsemen are denial, delusion, and shifting the blame. And this can end in very nasty outcomes. Divorces, jail terms, you don't get your milk and cookies at night, whatever it is. I mean, that actually makes
Friendships.
Friendships disappear, all kinds of stuff like this, right? So denial ignores or minimizes an essential factor of responsibility. So what's a simple example? You walk into the kitchen and you drink the last glass of milk in the carton. Your wife was thinking about making some pancakes, and guess what? And so she walks in the kitchen and goes, did you drink all the milk? And you look at her and go, I didn't drink the milk. And you've got a nice big milk mustache. Delusion. It creates an alternative, more favorable reality. An example of this is when I was in university with a bunch of engineering students. And they would, you know, the engineering students, we always had low grades because, I mean, like the average for the class is like 65. This is like North America wide. I mean, A's don't exist in engineering. So some of the guys would come in and they'd get a D on their paper, and they're happy, and they're saying D is for degree, D is for degrees. Well, you know, well, actually, in truth, D is for door and disappear. So because in engineering school, you had to have at least a 60 average just to survive, to stay there. So if you got a D, that's below 60. So you're going to be shown the door. So here they are celebrating something that didn't make any sense. There was a delusion that they could actually do this and get away with it. Okay? And then shifting the blame. That shifts the responsibility onto someone else or something else. I didn't do it. God made me do it. Or I didn't do it, you made me do it. Or I did that because you made me do it. You know, these kind of things. How many times have you heard that in your lifetime? It's pretty common, isn't it? I mean, yeah. That's because people are trying to basically escape personal responsibility for something they've done. They just don't want to accept that they've done it, right? Now, it's not so bad when other people are doing it, because we can spot it really easy when other people are doing it, right? When we're doing it ourselves, ouch. And trust me, we all do this ourselves. Periodically, we do this. Whether we like it or not, we're going to do it. It's just because it's easier. It's easier than taking responsibility for everything we do in our lives, right? So this is the easy way out. And if you can get away with it, it's going to reinforce it, and you're going to do it again, right? So that's what Dr. Alaska talks about. I like this guy because he just comes right out there and tells you all about it. He talks about predominantly about relationship issues. So I'll give you a little information on his book too, and I recommend that if you pick it up and read it. It's not very expensive, and really, if you're interested in how people are behaving, that's a great one.
Can I suggest one?
Yeah.
I read one called Girl Wars, and it's how women use relational aggression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'll get into that too.
That was
yeah.
an eye-opener.
Yeah. This guy's really good because he goes through the theory and why people behave this way, and then gives you real life examples, because he's had a lot of people in his office over the years, and he runs you through a real life example of what it looks like, you know. So you sit there and go, oh yeah, I've been in that. Oh yeah, that's ugly, right? And how do you deal with that, right? How do you deal with these toxic people, right? Because this is toxic behavior. It's not good. So we're going to talk now about the mind, and really there's two components to this, the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Has everybody heard about this? You're familiar with it, kind of? Sigmund Freud kind of postulated this stuff. It's really old. Sigmund Freud's like the great-grandfather of psychoanalysis. And so he kind of introduced the idea of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And the conscious mind are waking thoughts that you're aware of. And believe it or not, we each have about 70,000 thoughts a day.
Who is counting them?
Somebody obviously did. I didn't.
That's your job.
Somebody's counting them. It must be some board research or something.
Statistic Canada.
Yeah. Well, they got nothing better to do. 70,000 thoughts a day. So that's a lot. Your brain is actually really busy, okay? What those thoughts are, well, guess what? You get to choose them, right? Well, most people don't, because they operate on kind of autopilot and it just drifts. And your mind tends to drift over here, and your mind tends to drift over here. And I do this all the time. You think about the past, you think about the future. As we get older, we tend to think about the past more than we do about the future. It's just a normal tendency of aging. You know, and a lot of times we're not thinking about what's right here, right now. And so that gets to be a little bit, maybe not so good, because at the end of the day, how do you act here and now if your mind is someplace else? So we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness. The unconscious mind, okay? The unconscious mind is something that sits below our awareness. In other words, it's there, it's running all the time, but we're not really aware that it's there and running all the time, okay? And it's the thoughts and processes that you're not aware of. It's basically autopilot. If you think of it as an autopilot, like, you know, people, the pilots get into the plane, they take off, and they flick the switch, and the plane just does its thing by itself. Well, that's exactly, believe it or not, how we operate most of the time. We're just not aware that we're actually operating that way. And it applies to things like body regulation, you know, your breathing, your heartbeat, your temperature, digestion. You don't think about those things. Do you think about these things? No, they just happen, right? So, but something is thinking about these things to make them happen. Well, that's your unconscious mind. There's other things that are probably more problematic for us, like hidden beliefs that we don't know about, fears and attitudes, hidden truths. These things can actually stuff us up, especially if the truths that we believe are truths are not. Okay. Recent research suggests that this can happen, inherited trauma. What the heck is that? Well, that's what happens when you have trauma that comes from your parents. It comes in your DNA. Everybody heard of DNA? Okay, good. So we know now that you can actually have inherited trauma. So if your great-grandfather, for whatever reason, had a catastrophic incident in their life, it can set up a trauma pattern, and that can be actually passed on through DNA. And so you could actually be suffering from your great-grandparents' trauma, and you don't even know it, right? Because it's happening in your unconscious mind.
Do you have a reference to that particular statement?
Not on me, no.
Okay.
Yeah, not on me, no. But absolutely true. Bruce Lipton actually looks at this stuff.
Okay.
Okay, are you familiar with Bruce?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Bruce looks at inherited trauma, and he looks at what you can do about it, right? So one of the things he talks about, basically the idea that DNA is placid, that is, it's not fixed. Everybody kind of thinks that DNA is fixed, it's rigid, it doesn't change. But Bruce is kind of changing that. He's actually changing the way we actually perceive DNA. We know now that DNA is alive, and that we can actually change it in our lifespan. So, and we can do it through intention.
Through what?
Intention. That is, the way we think, the way we behave, and the way we feel can change our DNA. Yes?
The past speakers here, someone I remember, Marie Kropesky,
Mm-hmm.
just thought of Bruce Lipton. And I think Callie put the videos online from our group, I think she's on there.
Yeah, Bruce is a big time. I mean,
She always does the Bruce Lipton.
yeah, he's one of my superheroes, but he's really doing some interesting work. I mean, he's really moving the field of genetics, epigenetics forward, actually. So we heard that term if you talk to those folks.
So could this trauma from that you don't even know about,
Yeah.
could that possibly be by some people that have a terrible fear of something like snakes or, and they never had any run-in
Yeah.
with anything,
No
or
reason for it,
spiders or
rational.
something like
Yeah.
that, that's crazy?
Yeah, we're thinking maybe phobias have some basis in that. Some of it is yeah, irrational fears are a good example, I would think. What else? I mean, being short-tempered in situations that don't make any sense. You know, well, what the heck's that all about? I don't understand. Nothing's ever happened to me where I should behave like this in this situation. You're saying, well, what's going on with me? I don't understand this. You know, it might be inherited trauma. So this is really new. This is maybe 5 years, 6 years old. This idea that inherited trauma now can actually really affect us. So and we are still struggling with how to deal with that from a therapy standpoint, right? So energetic work, we're starting to look at energetic healing that as a mechanism to actually deal with inherited trauma, but we're not sure that's up and running yet. Okay. And learn behavioral norms. Ooh, this is stuff that you picked up from your family when you're like an infant, 2, 3, 4, and you forget about it. And it sits in your unconscious mind and controls the rest of your life. Okay. Any thoughts or ideas on that? Yeah.
Well, I work for a lot of First Nations
Uh-huh.
communities, and they go on and on about residential school.
Yeah.
And I must say, I'm a little tired of it, but I'm wondering why don't they just say that the trauma that they're experiencing in their culture is inherited?
Because they don't know.
Well, I didn't know it either. You're the first person I never realized that you could change it through beliefs and everything.
Uh-huh.
Well, because I know I'm getting really jaded about it,
Mhm.
because I'm just so tired of hearing about it. And I'm thinking, wow, they inherited this? Like every person has inherited this trauma of being oppressed, and even though they didn't experience it themselves, like the younger generations that I
Right.
work with,
Yeah.
but that trauma from their parents and grandparents of being oppressed in school and all those terror has been DNA inherited.
Yes, part of it is.
They should teach Caucasian people that. I didn't, because
Yeah.
I know I'm really
It's
jaded.
quite alarming, isn't it, when you figure that out?
Yeah.
If you look at Adam McLeod's work, Dream Leader,
Yeah. So that's, yeah.
Is he native, Adam McLeod?
Yes.
partly, yeah.
Oh,
I see him in Toronto.
He's a medical intuitive,
okay.
Vancouver,
Adam.
Yale Town Clinic.
All right, I'll read that.
So this inherited trauma, would that go for like serial killers and stuff like that?
Well, that could be a number of things, but I mean, like, really, this is something that's been in your family for a long time, like chronic anxiety, chronic depression. You know, that is within the family, and everybody seems to have it. You don't know, well, what's going on. Why is everybody depressed in my family? Why is everybody hyper anxious in my family? This is probably due to inherited trauma. Yeah.
If you're a Christian and learn from your Bible,
Mhm.
it tells that the sins, use a different word
Mhm.
for sin,
Are
are
visited.
visited
Mhm.
on the next
Well,
generation.
That's what they're really referring to.
I'm sure they are,
Yeah.
I'm sure they are. So who set that system up?
Well, you know, I'll tell
You
you
don't
what.
have to answer, that was
Well, I do know why. It
Oh,
makes-
you don't
yeah.
have an answer? Awesome. I can't.
So the reason why this mechanism has to work is because it's part of our inherited race memory. Does everybody know what inherited race memory is? It's basically the collective wisdom of the race. Like, how do we survive, you know? I mean, like, so especially when you're a baby and you don't know anything. So a lot of information has to be passed in some way. A lot of it's passed through DNA. Like, how do I survive? So if some traumatic situation happens and it manipulates the DNA of your parents and they pass those genes on to you, now you're built with those genes so you can survive. So this is what really this is all about. The problem is sometimes it mucks up and it locks in a pattern that's not particularly useful, especially in 50 years down the pipe or 50 generations down the pipe when you don't need to be anxious all the time because you're not going to be eaten in your bed every night, right? So this is the nature of that. Okay, that's why that's there. It makes complete sense when you look at it, but it doesn't service us long term. So somehow we have to unlock that, right? Any other questions before we do this slide? Yes.
Watching a program, Nature Things or something like that, but they were saying that unconscious mind is actually the controlling brain of your being.
Mm-hmm.
Your conscious mind is just your waking mind.
Well, if I had
They
to,
said that when you make any decision, no matter what it is, turn left, turn right, invest all your money in a deal, whatever, that your unconscious mind has already made that choice 10 seconds or so before you come say, hey, yeah, I think that's a good idea. But your subconscious mind has already done it.
yeah, that's one thing I didn't say. This puppy, probably 90% of all the activity that's going inside your head is in the unconscious mind. 10% maybe if you're lucky this much. And that's only if you got a lot of control of your thoughts. If you don't have control of your thoughts, your conscious thoughts, this thing is going to run your life.
And most of those 70,000, 80,000 thoughts a day are from your subconscious mind.
Yeah. And so and this is what I mean by running on autopilot. Yeah. Okay. Has everybody experienced that? Especially when you're driving. Eh? You get driving and you get in the car and you drive the same route, 100 times a week. And some days you can't remember how the hell you got to work. Like, how did I get here? Well, you're on autopilot. Your unconscious mind's actually doing it for you. You're not really paying attention, right? Your mind's someplace else. So.
And in an inherited trauma, that's actually a physical thing.
Yeah, it can be a physical,
Because,
psychological, emotional.
both
yeah.
my parents lived through the wars. And my mom, even to this day, if she hears an air raid siren, it freaks her right out.
Oh, yeah.
And you could see it, and that's been passed on to me. So when I hear an air raid siren,
Yeah.
I think of my mom's freaking out, right?
And you freak out,
Because
yeah.
she was there.
Yeah. So there's reinforcement for it, right? So what happens, the behavior actually reinforces it, and that gets in the family too.
So
So
you're
this is,
changing the behavior,
Mhm.
and your behavior will influence your genetics.
yeah, absolutely. So that's what we just talked about.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's not easy because these patterns are locked in pretty tight. You really gotta work at it.
You've got both psychological and physical
And emotional.
reinforcements working
Yeah,
against you.
yeah, so when you change it, you have to deal with all of it. You have to deal with the mental, the emotional, and actually live with the spiritual. So we'll get
And the
into that.
physical,
Yeah.
it's in your DNA, your cell structure, yeah.
So we're talking about the brain, and so when we talk about the brain, we have to talk about the Burns model. David Burns here, MD, was kind of like the godfather, grandfather of something called cognitive behavioral therapy. Have any of you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah, the road less traveled?
No.
That's a different Big
Yeah.
Burns, okay.
Yeah. So
That's
this is-
Scott Peck.
This is David.
Thank you.
Alternative truth.
Yeah, so he wrote a book called, what's the name of it now? I can't remember, it's at the end here. Feeling Good, New Mood Therapy. And
Oh,
it was
yes,
done
okay,
in the 80s. He wrote it in 1980, and it still is the gold standard today for psychotherapy. So whenever you go and see a counselor or a psychologist or even a psychiatrist to some extent, they're going to be using something called CBT on you. This is the nature of the way they actually try and help you out. It's like talk therapy. Everybody's heard about talk therapy. So really what the basis for this is the self-discovery of dysfunctional thoughts. What's a dysfunctional thought? Well, a dysfunctional thought is a conscious thought that just doesn't work for you, or an unconscious thought that just doesn't work for you. So, yeah.
So some people will say that you find out whether it's working for you by tuning into the feelings that thought causes. Do you ascribe to that theory yourself?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's many ways to skin a cat.
Okay, so that's one way.
So there's different ways, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this way is the way of the thought, and then we're going to talk about the way of the emotion.
Okay, thank
So
you.
there's different directions to get at a problem, right? So this one is the thought-based direction, how do we get at a problem? So if we have something, a dysfunctional thought, either a conscious thought or an unconscious thought. Unconscious is bad because it's controlling us, we don't know about it, we're on autopilot, right? Conscious, at least we know it's there, right? And then maybe we can discover it. So this is sometimes when you get stuck on something, you're behaving in a way you don't understand. It's like, why am I doing that? I don't understand why I'm doing this. Has anybody woke up? Has anybody come to done something and they go, why did I do that? And they don't understand why. That's probably because you're having a dysfunctional unconscious thought that's triggering this behavior. You just don't know it. And so if you find that you're doing this over and over and over again, you can't stop it yourself, then it's a good time to think about going to see someone to help you dig at why you're doing this and maybe change it, maybe. But it's a lot of work, but
Obsessive compulsive behavior.
yeah, that could be it, addictive behavior, these kind of things. You want to see an addictions counselor, they're going to be using this stuff on you, okay? Most people here aren't that because, we don't worry about that stuff here. We're all healthy people, right? But certainly that's what it is. Our psychotherapist is going to use this. This is the gold standard, basically, in psychotherapy today. And really what it does is it uses corrective logic or basically changes your thought. It focuses on changing your thought to replace or reframe, they use this word reframe in psychoanalytic theory, the old thought patterns. So change your thought, change the outcome. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
Yes, well this is what this is all about. This is where this comes from, and this comes from Mr. Burns' work actually. This, his book, Feeling Good, is one I recommend as well. And it really helps kind of sort out, what's wrong with the way I'm thinking. So he talks about this idea of an automatic thought, something that just pops in your head, right? Such as, my mother hates me. Now, just as an idea, okay? Well, does your mother really hate you? Well, you might feel that way, but you know, she probably doesn't hate you. I mean, so you know, you're looking at that, you're making a catastrophic decision about your mother, which is not true. So he has actually about 12 different categories of why this is not true. It's identifying what's wrong with your thinking.
Yeah,
And then what's the right way to think about it. So this table basically is really powerful because it helps you analyze your own thoughts, your own conscious thoughts, right? Unconscious thoughts harder because you're not sure what they are sometimes. Sometimes you can get them out when you work at it, but sometimes you need somebody else to help you get them out. So that's the difference, all right? If you get them out yourself, good. If you can't, go talk to somebody. Will help get it out of you, right?
Across the way out from our lake, there's a guy called Dr. Amen, and he does brain scans and such. He also talks about these subjects, and he has sort of narrowed it down to automatic negative thoughts, which are,
you can have those.
of that 80,000 thoughts a day because of programming of our society. Most of those thoughts of those 80,000, maybe 3/4 of them are negative.
Well, probably more like 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have
He calls them ants,
yeah.
automatic negative thoughts.
And this is not, I don't want you to personalize this, but as a species, we tend to be pessimists. That is to say, we have more negative thoughts than positive thoughts. And the reason for it is it's survival based.
I think it's training from society.
Well, some of that too is reinforced by society, but a lot of it's got to do with, you know, long-term survival. So the difference between an optimist and a pessimist is this. You're sitting on the plains in Serengeti in Africa, okay? And you're sitting there with your tribe, and so most people are, about 90% of people are pessimists, and 10% of people are optimists. And we know this, there's a propensity for this. So the 90% of the tribe is sitting there looking at the pride of lions that is just over there in the grass and going, no, I'm not going to go anywhere because, like, I'm going to get eaten, right? They're hungry. And the optimists are all going, oh, there's an apple tree about 2 kilometers away. Oh, those look like good apples. I'm just going to take a stroll over there. Dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum. Well, guess what? He's lunch.
The true optimist is going to go hunt the lion to eat him.
That's right. Optimism basically doesn't lead to survival. So pessimism leads to survival. And this is why we're more or less pessimistic as a species. As long as you realize this, it helps you because you say, oh, shoot, I'm just being pessimistic because, man, that's the way I'm wired, you know? So you have to say, no, that's not going to help me here because the lion's not going to eat me. There's no lions out there in the grass right now, right? I don't have to worry about that. So what's the truth of the situation? Well, I could sit here and do nothing and pretend that there's a problem, or I can go and do something, and what's going to stop me? Nothing. You know, nothing. Me, I'm stopping me. Right?
So again, it's learned what you've learned in your society.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's reinforced by that, but also, believe it or not, this thing that we call inherited trauma. Because that's part of your race learning, right?
My uncle got eaten by the lion.
That's right. Pretty traumatic.
Family trauma.
Okay, so this is the Burns model. So really important stuff. If you want to know more about it, read the book. The book is fantastic. It gives you a lot of practical tools and like to help sort things out too. So, and it's not expensive. It's on Amazon. So now we get into this thing. Oh my goodness, the emotions. And this is something that in North America, everybody wears their emotions on their sleeve. And if you ask them to tell them what they're feeling, they couldn't do it. Most people's emotional language is very, very poor. Yet their emotions are running like hot and cold running water all the time. So it's really difficult to deal with your emotions if you can't recognize them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And that's pretty uncomfortable probably at this point because all of us, to some extent, have problems dealing with our emotional states, right? I mean, God knows I do. I'll be the first to admit I have problems with it. You know, it's like, whoa, I don't like that feeling. So that's it. So the emotions are based in the amygdala, okay? And the amygdala is a part of the limbic system. So see these little 2 red dots up here? That's your amygdala. And all your emotion actually comes from that area. Now here's the thing about emotion that most people don't know. all of your energy to act comes from your emotions. So you absolutely need your emotions, right? You can't ignore them, because if you want to do anything, you have to get emotional about it. Does that make sense to you? You know, most people don't know that. All your energy to act comes from your emotional domain. The thought doesn't make you act, the emotions do. That's what gets the energy going to do it, okay? So it's responsible for, the amygdala is responsible for emotions. A lot of people call them feelings because the technical term is emotions, and people, the laymen, tend to use the word feeling. So how you feeling, you know, or, you know, we do this all the time. And it's also responsible for survival instincts that we already talked about, and a lot of memory, actually, believe it or not. Because if a significant emotional event happens, something really big, and you have to remember it, the amygdala comes up and says, wow, this is important. Okay, we need to remember this, so drill it into there so that it never comes out, right? And sometimes when it does a really good job of this, you get something called PTSD, right? Something really horrific happens, the amygdala comes up and it drills it in there so hard that you're never going to forget it. And that sometimes can result in something called PTSD. And we have lots of soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and saw horrific stuff. Some of my buddies, believe it or not, because I used to be in the military, are suffering from this thing, and they just can't seem to get it out. You know, they work at it and work at it, work at it, stuff. Okay, this part of the brain is early evolved, and it's primal. It's a primal part of the brain. Sometimes people call it the lizard brain, because it's that primal, if you believe in evolution. Some of us like to believe in creationism. Some people believe in evolution. From a science standpoint, we look at it and go, okay, well, we'll just call it this because it's kind of fun to call it that, I guess. And because lizards have the same kind of structure in it, that's the only reason why we do it.
Is anybody saying, don't go to war because you'll come back with your DNA changed for the worse?
No, nobody's saying that.
No one's saying that.
No.
Listen, I said it first.
Yeah. Better copyright it.
In general, I used to be a military officer.
Yes.
And I still hold a Queen's Commission. I will till I'm dead, because we don't lose our commissions in Canada.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, going to war is a horrible thing.
Yeah.
And it's something you do as a last resort, not as a, something to do on a nice Sunday afternoon just for fun. So unfortunately in our species, war tends to come. And, you have to deal with it the best you can at the time. And sometimes we don't invite it, and it just shows up at our back door. Fortunately, in Canada, we've been really lucky. We haven't had a war since 1812.
Mm-hmm.
But, so we've never seen it here for a long, long time, and only a few of us saw it back then. So there's just nothing you can do about it. Sometimes you can't avoid it, right? So I prefer war as a defensive measure, not an offensive measure.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about the emotions is they're reactive in nature, okay? They tend to be reactive, so they respond to usually a thought. That's actually the chain we're going to go into next, and how all this actually happens. It responds to thoughts and external environment, including things like food, sexual partners, rivals, children in distress, etc. All of these things can really invoke very strong emotion, right? It's survival focused. So this thing really wants to keep you alive. That's its basic requirement. The lion's coming to eat you. What are you going to do? Climb a tree or run like hell, right? And you need to get that energy up instantly, like this, boom, and your adrenaline's got to be up, boom, and you got to move, because otherwise you're lunch for some other predator. And so that's what this thing does for you, right? And the thing about emotions, and this is because a lot of people are really uncomfortable with emotions. It's like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about this stuff. It really makes me uncomfortable. I don't like this. Well, the fact of the matter is, they're an integral part of us, and we need to rule them. The hard part is learning how to rule them, right? So that you're not doing this and just reacting based on this. You want to get to a nice little even flow on it. Does that make sense to you?
There's nothing we could do about most things anyway.
You have to learn to live with them.
So we might as well, yeah, don't take it too serious.
Yeah, you have to learn to live with them. That's what it is for part of you. What are you gonna do? Just cut them out? You can't do that, right? It's impossible. So you have to learn to live with them. So that's what we're talking about, because you have to learn to live with this stuff, right?
Your word attenuate was very good.
Yeah, attenuate. Because you can't shift, like thoughts you can turn on and off like a switch. You can choose to think about something different, right? But emotions you can't. So they're always running in the background. And so all you can do is attenuate the intensity, right? And you don't want to shut off an emotion. Some people can do this, and some people have done that, shut off an emotion, but that's really unhealthy, actually, become dysfunctional, yeah. So here's a list of emotions. If you don't find this overwhelming, you know. So when you're sitting down on the couch, like I do sometimes, and you're trying to figure out how you're feeling, because my brain tends to run the roost, and sometimes it overruns my emotional domain, and I actually have to sit down in my feeling chair, because I have a feeling chair at home. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and I have to pull my list out and go, how am I feeling? Right? And I need to find a word for it, because emotional language, we don't teach our kids emotional language, right? So over here, we have the big 5 categories: love, joy, surprise, anger, sadness, and fear. And they're all completely legitimate and normal emotional expressions, okay? Some people like to classify them as being negative emotions down here, right? Okay, the anger, sadness, and fear are negative. And they tend to say, they want to say this is surprise is neutral, and then joy and love are like positive emotions. Because for the most part, the universe does kind of work that way. It's relational, right? However, that's kind of arbitrary. I mean, we could reverse that. It doesn't really matter. They're all normal, and they're all healthy, you know, in the right place, at the right time, and the right intensity, okay? So emotional research is just in the beginning. There's really little agreement in the field on the common core set of emotions. Believe it or not, there's probably only about 5 real hardcore emotional researchers in the world today. And we've only been looking at this really hard for the last 20 years, and nobody really agrees. And this is kind of a crazy thing, isn't it? Because when you realize all of our energy and all of our actions are driven by our emotions, and we're not studying this stuff, well, why do we have wars? Right? Here we just talked about it. Generally, people like to categorize emotions as positive or negative. You know, they think anger is a negative thing, sadness is a negative thing, fear is a negative thing. Well, because they're pretty intense, that's true, and they can really not feel good. You know, so they feel like, ooh, something's wrong. Whereas, you know, love and joy, hey, something's right. You know, it feels right. So this is why we call them positive and negative. But in truth, they're all normal parts of the way we are. Now, I like this because it kind of helps you identify where it is. And by the way, this list is not a complete list by any means. This is just my list that I use as a rule of thumb. I picked this off of the web at some point about 4 years ago, and I said, well, this is pretty useful, you know, because you can actually get to a point where you can say, hey, how am I feeling? Well, you know, I'm sad and kind of suffering, but I don't know what that is. And go, oh, am I in agony? No. Am I just suffering? No. Am I hurting? No, not really. Anguish? Oh, yeah. You know, and when you get to really being good with your emotions, you'll find that they actually reside in parts of your body. You can feel them. You can feel where anguish is, right?
Nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah. Like for me, anguish sits right down here. It's like, yeah. So when I get this feeling in my gut, like something's churning down there, going, oh, that's anguish. What the heck's going on, right? So, yeah.
But like we sort of have to control the emotions. Like I say, I can drive down the road and I can say that, but I have to, yes, I may be angry about what the person's not driving right in front of me, but I have to correct myself immediately and say, you know,
well,
some people could run right off the end of the world over that, you know, and run them off the road, but I have to say, no, it's just that.
Let it go.
It's a thought that's going through, forget it, you know, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, when we do this, we personalize other people's behavior, don't we?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, you're being an idiot. Well, you know, a bad driver cuts you off. Well, you don't know what's going on. This guy could be on drugs, could be drunk, could be sleep deprived, could be angry, could be just a terrible driver. You don't know what's going on, right? And you're saying, well, you're trying to kill me. Well, what are you really doing there? You're personalizing their behavior, right? It's got nothing to do with you. This guy just is doing something, whatever, doesn't make any sense. It kind of breaks the rules of the road, and it looks like he's endangering you, and so you get angry. It's like, so therefore, because he's made you angry, now he's a culprit. He's, disgusting person you don't want to deal with, right? You know, so, and this is what happens. I mean, this is what happens, and that's all emotional, right? I mean, this is like, wah! So now you got to deal with it. You got to rationalize that emotion somehow. But in truth, you really don't know what's going on with this guy. Yeah. Everybody get that? Yeah. So you're right. You have to attenuate the emotion. So you take that anger and say, not really useful. I don't know what's going on with this guy. So he just starts dissipating, right? Ooh, here's an interesting model. This is done by Dr. Roger Baker, PhD. And this guy's in the UK. And he run a research team for 35 years developing this model. And this model tells us how our emotions work. Now, it looks pretty complicated, right? And it is because he spent 35 years developing it. So the reality is pretty much, when you look at, how do we work, generally as people, if you're working sort of normally, this is what happens. So some event happens. I don't know, your spouse pisses you off, okay? I'm not sure what it is, maybe because you forgot to put out the garbage again on Thursday night, and my goodness, the garbage man comes at 8 o'clock on Friday morning, and man, I'm really pissed off because I've only had to tell you this like 35 times in the last year and a half. So this happens, right? I mean, this is part of living together, right? Relationships. And so then you're appraising this event. So husband hasn't put out the garbage. Well, that must mean he doesn't love me. Ooh, right? Because, if he loved me, hell, he would have put the garbage out, right? I'm just using this as an example. It could be the other way around too, right? So, and so then we get into this emotional experience. And so this thing called Gestalt, which is an interesting idea, and true in some cases. A lot of people feel this thing, Gestalt. And what Gestalt is linking, psychologically linking an event to an emotion. And a lot of us do that. When you have a strong emotional kick, we all have these things, right? Ask yourself, do I know why I'm feeling that way? How many of us know why we feel the way right away? Okay, now, so that's called Gestalt, right?
Yeah, I think I'm at that point. I can tell why I'm feeling. I can't tell maybe the people around me why I'm crying or whatever, but I know why I'm crying.
So that's one way. The other way is something called a somatic experience. So we actually have the emotion, but we don't know why. So you can ask your spouse, hey, what's up with you? Why are you behaving like that? What are you feeling? And they say, well, I don't know. But there they are bawling their eyes out. It's like, what? And guess what? They're not trying to deceive you. They're not being dishonest. They honestly don't know why they're feeling that way. So that's called a somatic experience. And so people either have Gestalt or somatic experience when it comes to emotions. So you have two very different people. A friend of mine, she has a somatic experience, so like the majority of people here. And so she sits there and she gets this feeling, and she doesn't know why she gets the feeling. And then she has her, I have my feeling chair. She has her thinking chair. So if she has a feeling that she doesn't understand, she goes and sits in her thinking chair, and she thinks and thinks and thinks until she figures out why she's feeling that way. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So it's just different ways that people are kind of wired. We're a little bit different in this way, okay?
Right brain, left brain?
Well, I don't think that's it. It's
No,
just,
okay.
it's just some people are just more wired for feeling, and some people are more wired for thinking, right? And that's just the way it is, okay? So, and neither one is right or wrong. I mean, they're both useful. It's just when somebody says, you know, I don't know what's wrong, they're probably being honest, okay?
Sometimes you just get depressed for no reason.
Yeah, you don't know.
I just
Yeah,
don't know why, I just feel like.
Couldn't tell you, yeah.
The world's out of control, or my life is just going nowhere, you feel like you're in loss for,
Yeah.
nothing is right.
Yeah, that's
all.
called somatic response. Okay, that's a technical term for it, and it's completely natural and normal, okay? And lots of people here saying the same thing, no problem. Awareness. Well, this is what happens. Okay, first you get the emotion, and then you become aware that you're having an emotional issue, right? Because now your brain's kind of catching up to where you are. And if you really start to get good at it, you start labeling it, right? Ooh, what the heck is this? Oh, I'm sad, or I'm happy, or you know, I'm feeling depressed, or whatever it is. That's good, right? And then if you can link that back to the event, because now you know that this event makes you feel this way, okay? And that's the learning thing. And then we have something called emotional expression. This all happens, by the way, in a blink of an eye. Boom, 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 very, very quickly, okay? Then we have an emotional expression, okay? You're angry. So first of all, you get flushed, and you get this surge of adrenaline, and the next thing is like, right? That's the expression, right? The expression is as we're starting to move, our face is contorting, and suddenly we're expressing it, right? There is no action yet, but we're actually starting to express. And so expression is that. And then after that is action over here. It's not actually in this diagram, but it's very interesting. So what's interesting here is this. Sometimes the input event is actually a memory of past occurrence. Say somebody's passed away. And we sit there and we think about them and suddenly we start crying. Why? Because we're still sad about it, right? We're still grieving. And that can take quite a bit of time, you know, to deal with it. And there's no time frame for grieving. So the memory of an input is an important thing. This can actually trigger an emotional event too, okay? This is really the critical part of this whole model here. It's appraisal of the meaning of the event. This is where we actually are sitting there and trying to figure out in our minds very, very quickly, how important is this event to us? Because if it's not important, well, on to the next thing. If it's important, whoop, okay, now I'm going to have an emotional event. Because now I need to get energy up to go and do something, or do something about it, right? So that's just the way we are. So that can be from past memories, or emotional schemas. Emotional schemas are really interesting. Emotional schemas are how our emotions are actually organized in our system. And they can actually trigger an emotional event as well. So that's something that's important to know. And, yeah.
I remember in this area that you pointed out as important, I remember how amazed I was at the piece of input that I was the significant giver.
Mm-hmm.
The significance didn't reside in
Outside.
the event.
Yeah.
It was here.
Here, yeah, exactly.
That's a big growth step.
Yeah. Sometimes what we believe to be true is not true, and sometimes we can create things in our own mind that make us act. Right? This is the idea of desire. You know, desire can make us act, right? It can give us emotional, but that doesn't come from anywhere. There's no external event. We're actually creating that internally. Right? So when you talk to somebody that's talking to you about, you know, how to get what you want in life, and they say, well, you got to desire it, you know, before you can manifest it. And, well, what's that all about? Well, it's about, you know, you got to do imagery. So you create this vision of what you want, right? So what you're doing is you're creating an event in your mind, right, to get up the emotional energy to act. It's a very positive situation, right? So otherwise you're going to sit on the couch and eat Pringles like me. You know, so, okay, get the idea?
Yes.
So it can be external or an internal thing, absolutely. So you look up, someone's dropping from the sky, piano, and he's going to drop on your head. Well, emotional event, yikes, jump, you know, get out of the way, save your life, right? So that's how it works. Got that? Over here, this is kind of interesting up here, this whole idea of control of emotions. Now, and this is not the best word, control. Most people talk about regulation of emotions because I think it's good, but he uses control because you can actually control some of the input situations here in the way you actually think about it. So I always think thought control, emotional regulation, because that's the healthiest way to think about it, okay? All right. How are we doing for time here? We're doing good. So what Baker tells us, okay, we only have one moment. This is from Exervstorm's book, okay? We only have one moment in any event to change our behavior, or that is to change the outcome. Only a moment, okay? And the moment comes when we are appraising the meaning of the event. Remember I was showing where it's very important here? Okay, this is it. And believe it or not, we only have 1/5 of a second to make a decision to change the outcome. 1/5 of a second. So if you don't catch it in that 1/5 of a second, guess what? Too late, all right? And the only effective thought that we can have in this window of opportunity is this one word, right? Okay? So somebody at home, and usually our loved ones piss us off like nobody else does, right? It's just the way it is, because we're emotionally vested in them. So somebody at home pisses you off, and suddenly you're sitting there and, well, you're going to get really angry, right? It's like you can feel that it's starting to build up, right? And it's self-reinforcing. So the thought starts to come, well, this person doesn't respect me. The only word you can do to stop that chain of events from you getting really angry, yelling back at them, and maybe striking out is the word stop. Because that allows you to take a breath and think about how you really want to behave in that situation. But if you don't say this word in that window, you're going to be on autopilot and you're going to keep doing what you've always done, whatever that is. Okay?
I saw a DVD of a wonderful Canadian woman on the West Coast that's working with people who've gotten themselves into a limbic loop.
Mm-hmm.
And in the therapy part, the first thing that she teaches is stop, stop, stop.
That's exactly.
And that's an attenuation, by the way, to use your word again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what it is. So this is the only word you're going to get into 1/5 of a second is stop. So learn this word, stop, because that's going to allow you to basically stop. Because we stopped when we heard the word stop, and that allows you to think. Because if you don't stop to think, you're going to keep doing what you've always done, and that could be not so nice, right? We are trying to change our behavior here. So that's kind of the end of that. Oh, are there any questions on that before we move on? Sorry. Yeah.
This is kind of a supplement to it, but the newest thing that everybody's into is neurosciences and the actual physical workings of the brain. And they say the more you repeat a process or a thought, the more that pattern is going to get laid down in the synapses in your brain. So they say a lot of our negative thoughts, our ants or whatever you want to call them, are laid down because of habit.
Habit, yeah.
3/4 of all your behaviors, whatever they may be,
habit.
Whether you're freaking out in road rage or you don't like the guy next door for a particular behavior, that's all comes from habits.
So this is what we're talking about.
Habits of thought.
Yeah, we're talking about how to break habits. How to break our old thinking
How
patterns.
do you stop the habit?
Stop the habit, right? So that's a powerful word. Most of us don't use it. We think it's a sign someplace.
And by doing that, you're also rewiring your brain.
Absolutely.
If you do it over and over and over again
Yes.
for a month, 2 months, you start to have a different pattern.
So the next topic we're going to talk about quickly is spirituality. And this is, oh my goodness. Has anybody heard of David Hawkins?
Yes.
Hawkins is kind of the guru in spirituality research. He's studied for 35 years. And he wrote a book, a really interesting book called Power versus Force back in the 90s, which is kind of it's a book that explains how we become spiritual. And most people are unfamiliar with spirituality. A lot of people actually think that religion is spirituality. It's not. Or you might get to spirituality through religion, but definitely they are not the same thing, okay? So in this book, and I'm going to just review the book quickly, because if you really want to learn about spirituality, this is what you go buy this book. It costs maybe $10, and give it a good read. And boy, it is not an easy read, but you're going to walk away from that with a very different understanding of the world that you live in, okay? Power is the ability to live without using toxic exploitive or destructive emotions, acts, or behavior. That's basically what he says in this book. In other words, you're acting in a positive way towards yourself and towards others, right? And we just talked about the natural propensity of people to basically work in the negative domain. So the opposite side of that coin is force, which is perceived success at somebody else's expense. So that's why we actually kind of stay down there, because we think there's a payoff to staying down there.
Part of that is your social habit.
Part of that is your social habit, your social
You see
norms.
that with the Nazis.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the reason why people stay there, is because they perceive that there's success by being there, right? You know, I'm gonna screw my buddy over for $10. I'm not gonna pay him back the loan I gave him. He gave me on Friday night, because I drank it for beers, and I don't wanna deal with any of that, right? So I'm gonna just ignore the loan. So what's the payoff? Well, guess what? You got free beers, right? Okay, you pissed off your buddy, you know, but you don't care. So, but that's a force-based thought pattern process of spiritual essence. So one of the big things is that consciousness is the true nature of our being. In other words, this thing that we call a body and this mind is nothing more than a vessel for a consciousness. Complicated thought, isn't it?
Which means your subconscious and your waking conscious.
Well, what it really means is, and this consciousness is in a different way, this is spiritual consciousness. So the
Yeah, that either one without the other.
yeah, so this is our physical being, right? And then we have a spiritual being. Some people in Christianity call it a soul. In other religions, it's called some other things, the idea that there's more to you than just this physical presence, right? So that's what he's talking about, is something, a consciousness that's independent of your physical self, right? Okay?
Does Hawkins' consciousness have an attribute called intelligence?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I had to think about that for a second, because I read most of his books, and I had to think about that, because it's challenging when you start trying to put
Attributes,
attributes
yes.
and characteristics on consciousness. Okay. Consciousness, and this is the reason why, because consciousness exists across the continuum of existence. That's everything. Wrap your head around that one.
Does that include that?
Young,
That includes everything.
young
That-
in psychology.
That means that even a rock has consciousness.
Consciousness.
Yes, right.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly true. Wrap your head around that one. That means everything is conscious, yes.
I remember years ago, I used to read books by Deepak Chopra,
Mhm.
and he said that it's also vitality because everything vibrates with consciousness. You just cannot see it with the human eye.
Yeah, the truth
But
of-
everything is in motion all the time.
All the time.
Which,
Everything is
which
energy.
reflects its vitality.
Yeah. So mostly what we're made up of is empty space and packets of energy, right?
Yes.
And we're always dynamically trading energy with everything around us. And the only way that can happen, and that we all don't fall apart into some kind of meaningless soup, is that there's a consciousness that allows us to be here the way we are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is that
Yes, because you can't come up with anything else.
Yeah, so that's what we gotta call it, right? Yeah.
So it is like an intelligence, because
Mhm.
a lot of what we know or that we experience in life, we're not conscious of it,
Mhm.
but consciousness is.
So
Yeah.
I and David, we kind of use the same, we came to it from different, I mean, I shouldn't say this, I don't know, not to speak this way, but I use the word universal intelligence. And actually David uses exactly the same language. And I was surprised when I read his work that he actually used exactly the same words. And I'll tell you what, when you see people arriving at the same conclusion from different directions, that's usually truth, right? So, and no matter how you get there, truth is truth.
Well, nothing can be created nor destroyed, so what really is?
Just change.
More than consciousness, and we're all in it, right?
You got it. So that's a very strong argument to be nice to your fellow man, Because at the end of the day, there's not really a distinction between you and your fellow man, even though we think there is. Get it? Yeah.
This is all ours. This is all ours.
Yes.
We just share it.
It's like what you're saying, sometimes when things die, you think it's gone, but all it has really done is change energy levels.
Yep.
It's still with us, but it has changed energy levels, and that's the reason why they say you should be nice to everybody, because they're, I don't
Well, the
they're
Buddhist
still
says-
there, you know,
yeah.
even though they're dead in the physical sense, but
They're still there.
their energy is
Yeah,
still
there,
here, yes,
absolutely true.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. The energy doesn't go anywhere. It just basically, because energy, I'm gonna use this expression, which is not talked about in literature, but energy is relational. That is, it has relation with one another, otherwise none of this works, right? Because if your body doesn't cooperate and cooperate relationally, you don't exist. You couldn't, right? So there's only two things that can happen. The energy in your body's gotta be relational, right? It's gotta be intelligent, and you know, it's gotta be cooperating, because otherwise none of this could happen, right? So this is the way of the universe, and if you fight the universe, you're not gonna do very well.
You're gonna get sickness and illness, yeah.
Exactly.
Everybody's gonna hate you and you're not gonna make it.
That's right. Yeah, that's not a happy thought, because we all need each other to survive, believe it or not. You know, we're not that good by ourselves.
Self-destruction.
Oh, there it is.
So here we go. This is the map of consciousness. This is something that David created back in the 90s. This is really, this is just an excerpt. It's not the whole actual map, but it gives you an idea. So we talked earlier about becoming. So the act of becoming is setting the levels of consciousness until you arrive at your innate ability. Okay? So what this is kind of a scale. So down here at the bottom is like, wow, okay, we're miserable, we feel shame, and humiliation is kind of like the emotion that goes with that, right? And then up at the top of it is like, oh, your life view is, oh, is. Most people don't ever get to understand what is, that's okay. It's called enlightenment, and you know, this is kind of the scale he uses. The scale is logarithmic scale here. So think of a funnel upside down, like this. And what that really means is that everybody fits within the funnel. And so very few people are right at the top of this thing. There's a lot of people at the bottom, right? So we have this situation. Again, we have what we call positive and negative states for all intents and purposes. So positive level of consciousness and negative levels of consciousness, even though he starts at 0, okay? And the breakover point here is at 200. So this is the breakover point and he's done research on this. He's actually done muscle testing, done all over the world, and done some really interesting research to validate this table as far as we know. Pulled all the old religious texts, and he's studied this stuff for 35 years. Probably the leading expert. He's passed away now, unfortunately. Really, really nice guy. Yeah. But anyway, so what it does is it basically helps us determine where we're sitting, you know, in terms of spiritual being a spiritual being, right? And most people sit down here. About 80% of the world resonates below 200. So 4 to 5 people are actually experiencing negative emotions all the time, negative thoughts, negative ways of being. And that's not very healthy, right? I mean, this is why when you look at CNN or you look at the news, CBC News, it's always negative. You know, part of that's agenda. I guess some of you are well aware that the news media is controlled, and some of it's agenda. Some of it's just because that's the way people are. Most people are, right? So you go, oh, I've had enough of that. Well, you can choose not to be that, right? So this thing tells us that, yes, we have a choice, which is the upside of it. We have a choice. We don't have to be negative. We can choose to be something else. We can become something else, right? And that's what becoming is. The choice to be more than the normal. And that's a thought. It's a thought. And you're empowered to do that. Only you are empowered to do that, by the way. Nobody else can choose that for you. Because you are absolutely in charge of your thinking. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Here's an odd question.
Okay.
I think a lot of this has to do with your upbringing, most of that, your early upbringing, because the rest of it's just repetitive. But where does the Manchurian candidate fit in there?
Oh,
Take an average person, you destroy them totally, and you rebuild them into a negative automatron.
Yeah.
Where's your consciousness then?
I don't know about that particular situation, but I can tell you, up here is Buddha, Christ, over 700, okay? Mother Teresa, here, and she was a saint, right? The average person, virtually nobody gets the level of love. Because this is not just love, this is unconditional love. Can you imagine love without condition? Oof, for me that's a scary thought. I mean, how do you do that, right? How do you do that?
So where did the chooser go in his example?
For what?
Hypnosis and whatever the nasty things got done.
Exactly, you
Where
take an
did the
ordinary
chooser
person who has
go?
all of these things,
Where
you
did
can
the
destroy
chooser
it
go?
and rebuild it into a total automatron, negative thing, just go do things, right?
Yeah.
Manchurian
Which
Candidate.
is like God is great.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, so I
Or
can't
you want
comment.
to-
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah. So I haven't seen the movie, so I couldn't comment on
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's done all the time. The ISIS does it all the time. People blow themselves up.
Mhm.
They
Oh, yeah,
brainwash
they convince them.
They take a totally normal individual and change the consciousness altogether.
Well, they
They can't change consciousness,
No,
they
they
can
don't.
change content.
yeah, what they do is they change their thinking patterns.
Yeah.
And that changes their behavior. So what they do is they manipulate their thinking to a point where they think that they're doing the right thing.
Uh,
That's brainwashing.
So that's
Yes.
basically like some religions,
Yeah.
they
Yes.
tend and pretty soon you're believing what they're believing.
Yeah, you
Yes.
didn't see me do this, but
Okay.
Yeah.
But for them, it's good karma. I'm going straight to heaven.
That's right, yeah. Well, they think, especially some of the Muslims, the ultra-Orthodox Muslims, that it's like, okay, you're going to go to heaven, and yet, I forget how many dozen virgins is your
Yeah,
If you
reward,
live
right?
your life
Yeah.
first.
Allah's going to pat you on the back and hand you your virgins.
Yeah.
Take out a bunch of infidel with
You
you.
do what we say, yeah?
Hey, Laura, we've been enjoying that one.
Okay. So how do we get a handle on all of these things, these thoughts, these feelings, the spirituality already? So what we start with first is our magic word. Stop. If you're doing something that's not working for you, stop. Okay? Just stop it. Harder to do than said, okay? Because it takes a lot of discipline to hit that fifth of a second where it's going to be successful. So what you got to do is go stop, until basically, if you know you're getting there, to try and get yourself just to stop. And that allows you the breathing time to calm down and think, and then, what do I really want? So we're going to get into a little bit of that. And so this is what we're talking about. What do we do once we've gotten the stop? Well, we ask 3 critical questions. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? Right? Why do we do this? Because it puts us in the present moment. It forces us out of the abstract and forces us into where we are now. Right? So it's called bring us into the present moment. And it's really critical to be in the present moment when you're trying to change, because you can't change anything else. Can't change the future, can't change the past. All you can do is change the present moment. Does that make sense? All we can do is act in the moment. That's the only power we have. Okay? So you ask, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? Okay? And once you get a handle on those things, then here's the next 3 redirection questions. I want to change. Say you want to change. You don't like the way you're thinking. You don't like the way you're feeling. You don't like what you're doing, right? Whatever that may be. Or maybe what I'm thinking, feeling, doing is A-okay, in which case you don't have to stop. You can just keep doing it because it's awesome, right? I mean, like, let's just carry on. It's when you're doing something you don't like and that you're getting a very negative response from other people, you can stop it and start with these 3 basic questions. Okay? Then, once you get a handle on this, once you understand how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're behaving in a certain situation, then you can ask, well, what do I do now? Well, you can redirect. And there's 3 really powerful redirecting questions. This one is called the master question. Right? It's like, what do I need from this situation right now? Because again, it makes us focus on our core needs. What do we need right now? Do we need a relationship with a person? Do we not need a relationship with a person? Right? Do I need to take care of my health and well-being? Do I can I let that slide for a bit? You know, what do I need from the situation right now? For instance, say you just walked out of a quadruple bypass surgery, right? And you're sitting there and you're way overweight, nobody here's this big, but I mean, some people are hyper obese, right? And your surgeon comes in and says, either you change your lifestyle or you're gonna be dead in a year, right? He says here, what am I thinking, what am I feeling, what I'm doing? It's like, no, that can't be true. And so you go through all this denial and finally go, okay, well, maybe he's right, you know, no. So then you say, well, what do I need for the situation right now? Well, obviously, I've got to change, or I'm dead. Of course, you could accept the fact that you're going to be dead in a year and just go home and party like hell, which is what a lot of people do. But the reality is, if you want to continue in this form, at least, then you have to do something pretty radical. Okay? Next question is, what is my long-term self-interest? And we ask this question. This is the most important part of this, long-term. And in self-interest, this is really critical. This has real meaning here, okay? Long-term, well, most of the decisions we make are short-term. They're like, you know, how many people think 10 years out?
Can get depressing.
Well, not really, because the future's not set. Right? The future can be what you want it to be.
Depends. If you're 60 years old,
Not necessarily.
next step's the box.
Yeah, but, I mean, do you have grandchildren? I mean, what makes you excited when you think about, you know, how do you want your life to look? You're the architect of your life, right? That being said, society does try and control you in some ways. There's no doubt about that. But still, you're responsible for your own thoughts, and that drives your emotional content, and that will drive the changes. So we think about what we can affect now. It's not what we can control, because we can't control a whole lot, but we can affect things. And by affecting things, we can change the direction. So you think about it like this. Instead of life is going to be like this, only one line, straight line, and that's all it's going to be. No, it's like, ooh, it could be over here, it could be over here. Okay, it's not going to be way back there, but you know, you can direct it by affecting the way you think, and the way you feel, and the way you act, right? Okay? That's what we're really talking about. And finally, this is a spiritual question, because it's really, what do I desire to become? So if you're that obese person, let's say for instance, and you finally got through this and you realize, oh my God, yes, he's right, I want to live, right? What do I got to do? Well, what do I need from this situation right now? Well, I'm going to have to radically change my diet. I'm going to have to radically change my exercise. I'm going to have to radically change my entire life. And I need to do it now, right? So how do I do that? Well, what's my long-term self-interest? Well, maybe I have to eat more vegetables and reduce my calorie intake, and how's that's going to have a big impact. I'm going to drop weight, and I'm going to be more energetic, and I'm going to be happier and healthier. And then finally, it's like, what do I want to become? Because without having a vision of you in that new life, you lose interest, right? So this is where we're talking about desire. Really, this is about desire to become, right? What do you want to be? Because you can be pretty much whatever you want within, you know, constraints of being human. We can't be superhuman or anything else like that.
So what's doing the desiring? Not consciousness. Is it the chooser?
Yeah, the chooser.
Thank you.
You are the chooser,
Thank you.
right? Okay. It is your choices that determine basically how your life's gonna evolve. Now, if you believe you don't have a choice, guess what? You're just giving your choice away to somebody else.
But your unconscious already made that choice long before you.
Well, it could have done that. And so if you get stuck in a position where you're doing things that don't make any sense to you and you can't change it yourself, time to go see somebody, right?
I think the worst question is, what do we really want out of life?
Well, you got to ask yourself that. Actually,
we only have so long here.
Yeah. So I don't ask myself what I want anymore. There was a time I thought about needs and wants and all the rest of this stuff now, but I realized that that is an emotional language. I ask myself, what do I desire? Because desire is emotional language, and out of desire comes action, right? So just shift it, just a subtle shift. What do I desire? Desire is powerful, right? Because you can build images around desire. You can build a campaign around desire. You know, it's hard to build a campaign about, well, I need to build a bathroom. You know what I'm saying? Even though it's really important sometimes to do that, but it's really, you can't get excited about it. And whenever you want to change, you got to get pretty excited about it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen because it takes a lot of work. And that's what we're talking about next, change. All right? Everyone resists change. Okay? I resist change. Everyone resists change. Nobody likes it. Why? Because it takes us out of our comfort zone. We were talking earlier about comfort zones. So comfort zones are wonderful, but nothing grows there. Okay?
So cool.
So let that settle just for a second.
You've given several take-home pieces, but that's the best one.
Okay. So everyone resists change. Why do we resist change? Because it's scary. If I'm not who I am today, tomorrow, then who am I? And if that doesn't scare the hell out of you, you know, you're not functioning right.
Part of it is you're a habitual creature, so you have to change your habit.
Yeah,
It's hard to do.
Habits are hard to change. And you don't know what the outcome's gonna be when you move away from your habits. So that's darn scary.
It's still hard to do.
That's scary, right? Change is difficult. It's not easy. It was easy, everybody would do it, right? So most people don't do it. I can tell you how difficult it is. A study back in 2005 with cardiovascular patients. They took 10 people from having triple and quadruple bypasses. They gave the surgeons a script and had two groups of them, actually 20 people altogether. But the control group, the people that basically they were trying to figure out, you know, how difficult is it for people to change, even under the dire threat of death, because that was the script. You do not change, you're going to die, and you're going to die soon. Well, a year later, they went back and did the follow-up, and some of them were dead, of course. But what they realized was that only 1 in 10 people actually changed, even with the threat of death. So that is how difficult it is, right? It's not easy. And that's why I say you have to really desire to change, because otherwise it's not going to happen, right? It can't be a willy-nilly, well, it would be nice, maybe. Forget it, you lost the battle. It's like, yes, I'm going this way. And that's it. That's the way you got to be about it. And it requires these things, personal responsibility. Ooh, big nasty word in North America, because everybody in North America is trying to avoid responsibility, right? It's in our culture to avoid responsibility. Discipline, difficult. We're not talking willpower, because you know everybody knows what willpower is. Guess how many minutes of willpower you got a day? It's a very small gas tank. 15 minutes a day, and if you use it up first thing in the morning, it's done. Okay, that's right out of the research. So willpower is not going to help you change, right? Responsibility and discipline, yeah. And this other thing called grit. Now this is a new field of study under positive psychology. And you can check it on the web, and actually there's a little survey to find out how much grit you have. Grit is sort of like tenacity, stick-to-itness, resolve, these kind of words, right? You know, how do I get it done? And so a lot of people, well, they have trouble with grit. And if you don't have grit, you're not going to change, because it's what keeps the discipline going, and it's what helps reinforce responsibility. So you might have to work on your grit before you actually get to.
That would be like stubborn?
Pardon?
That would be like stubborn?
Yeah, the worst case scenario, stubborn, yeah. And then right on the end of the scale would be stubborn to the point where like, I'm gonna keep doing this, doesn't matter if it's not working.
No,
right?
but I'm gonna quit. You could be pretty stubborn.
Yeah, you can be pretty stubborn. When you say stop, you should be stubborn when you use that word stop.
Mhm.
Stop, and
Yeah.
be stubborn about it. Because if you're not stubborn,
Yeah,
off you go
yeah,
back on
back
autopilot.
on the track, yeah.
Very much depends on how strong the neural pattern has been established.
Yeah, that's why you
If
gotta
it's a
check
really
yourself.
super traumatic event that has a lot of adrenaline associated with it, that pattern is extreme.
Yep.
You get that in obsessive compulsive people.
Absolutely, yeah, and PTSD too, when it's really, really wired hard, right? So
And it's really, really hard to stop.
And really, really hard to stop, exactly. So the upside of change, and here's something, that's the downside, right? Because wow, this is not very fun. this is not fun at all, but what do we get out of change? Well, in particular, positive change. Well, it opens up new potential and experiences. Whoa, well, so life is getting dull and boring. Change something. Not dull and boring anymore, no. It promotes growth and learning. Oh my goodness, wow, keep those neurons firing. Ward off dementia, you know, you'll feel a lot better, gives you something to do, life is good. And it results in an adaptation. Ooh, this is a big word, right? That means that you're not going to be the same person you were, right? You're adapting to something new. And long-term benefit, because the bottom line is if you choose to change for the good or for the positive, you can't lose. It's a zero-lose situation, right? Unless you don't go through with it. And it's necessary for the process of becoming, which is basically spiritual elevation. So when you think about becoming, it's about ascending up that ladder of spirituality. And at the top, boy, nobody can maintain the very top levels. You go up there and you come down, you go up and come down. But the reality is that you want to get to a point where you're not doing harm to anybody else. So you want to get above 200, because below 200, you're hurting yourself and your neighbors. You want to get above 200 because now you're not going to hurt yourself and your neighbors so much, right? And people like that. So, does that all make sense? Okay. So, finally we're here, right? Last slide. Conclusion. Self-leadership is all about becoming, right? So really this is what we've been talking about, is this whole idea of how do we change our thoughts? How do we deal with our emotions? How do we become spiritual beings so that we're actually contributing to the betterment of ourselves and our society and our families and, you know, these kind of things. All the elements of the mind, body, and spirit are engaged in this process of becoming, right? Because it's change, and there's no way you're going to change without changing all these things at the same time. And this is a lifelong personal quest. It's not something you just do on a Saturday. You know, I got up Saturday and I think I'm going to change myself. I have to become like a super spiritual being. No, afraid not. It doesn't work that way. So especially if you're going to pursue spirituality, and very few people actually do. I'm going to tell you that right now. We all get busy with all these other things, and we forget to take care of our spirit. And, you know, of course, when the Maker comes to call on us, guess what? The judgment is on. At the end of the day, if you believe in the Maker, they're going to judge you based on your spiritual energy more than anything else, because we are all energy, right? Does that make sense? And this personal journey really serves, I mean really, which means real, look at the root word real, serves to improve your life, the lives of the people around you. Right? That's why you want to do it ultimately, because otherwise what's the point? You know, because we're all here to actually improve our lives. I mean, this is why you listen to chiropractors talk about, you know, self-laxations, and, you know, you're talking to nutritionists, they're talking about how you should be eating all day and all night, and, you know, all of these things. What is it really all about? Well, it's about improving the quality of your life, and in doing so, improving the quality of the life for the people around you. Why? Because, heck, we're here, we might as well try and make the best of it, right? I mean, misery is everywhere. It doesn't take much to be miserable, so we might as well try and work on making life better. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions whatsoever about all of this? I know it's a lot of material, so. And here, just so if you want to write down or take a picture of this, these are the 4 books that we talked about. So this has been a bit of a book review. But if you want to pick these up, they're all available on Amazon. They are definitely worth the read. These are my personal favorites in the area. So that's why I wanted to share them with you tonight.